Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Biz Meds. We are your hosts. My name is Saad.
And I'm Darris.
In the last couple of episodes, we've been talking about how we're neuroscience business coaches and how we are different from your standard business coach. And the reason why is because there's a lot of things that utilizes neuroscience to further enhance you on your business side. And you know, we've been getting some questions about, like, are there any real life examples? And the interesting thing is there's a lot of successful people that are doing these types of things,
Yes.
but they've never, ever mentioned them because they themselves are not aware of it. They've managed to tap into that type of potential and utilize it in their day-to-day, into their business, but they just haven't voiced it because they don't know any better about it.
They either don't know or they're not sharing because
Yeah.
it is potentially one of the most tightly guarded secrets in business. Could be either one of those.
Yeah.
We're not saying it is or it isn't.
Yeah.
The fact is there are many examples of very successful entrepreneurs out there utilizing neuroscience and psychology and the very little known areas of them to make massive results. Mm-hmm. And the clues are in how they talk. Mm-hmm. And that's where we get to dissect one of those today.
Yeah. And do you have anybody in mind that you think we should talk about?
I mean, I think this was a great one because it marries our love for the gym.
Yeah. Yeah.
Our love of entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
Leadership.
Yeah.
And really sound frameworks. Yeah. And so if you haven't guessed it, we're going to talk about Alex Hormozi.
Oh, yeah.
And if you don't know who Alex Hormozi is, look him up. You probably, if you're a business owner, you've probably seen him on your social media, YouTube, Instagram, blown up over the past few years. Mm-hmm. And he and his wife, Layla, own acquisition.com. And they started out with their gym business, which is called Gym Launch. And it was, I think, a really great case study for where we can demonstrate that you can operate as a business owner just like someone as successful as Alex Hormozi. And the clues are really in how he talks about business and what he does and how he executes. Mm-hmm. And it's less about some of the tactical things or the silver bullets that we think that we're missing. Mm-hmm. And it's really comes down to what are the really key foundational frameworks that he uses to execute. Mm-hmm. And that's where we're going to dive into today.
Mm-hmm. And then the other thing, again, to build off of what you just said, again, when you listen to him, you can tell that he's into that flow state. He's utilizing that. And the reason why I bring that up is because a buddy of mine recently mentioned him, but he couldn't recognize his name. So it's funny you say that, you know, some people might know of him by his name. Some people just might know what he looks like.
Yeah. So
my buddy called him the crazy guy in the tank top.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty accurate. He's a successful dude that wears a ball cap, one of the biggest, bushiest beards.
Yeah,
I used to think I had a bushy beard back in the day, but yeah. He's got long hair. He kind of looks like New Jesus.
Yeah.
And wears a tank top all the time, and sometimes with a plaid shirt over top of it.
Yeah,
wears the hat that says acquisition.com.
Yep.
So
perfect definition.
Maybe by that definition, you might know who we're talking about.
If you literally Google that, you will probably run into that face.
Probably. So yeah, we're going to spend some time really dissecting how you as a business owner can operate like Alex Hormozi and use the secrets that he uses and implement those exact same way. Mm-hmm. So I think we'll dive into kind of, I think, what are the key things that really help us understand that he does actually use flow state. Mm-hmm. And again, the disclaimer is we don't know if he knows or doesn't know if he's utilizing flow state, right? But we know as flow experts the earmarks and what those consistent signs of being in flow are, and they match up one for one.
Yeah, it is. So again, he's very knowledgeable about what he does. But for a lot of entrepreneurs, there's like 3 different stages. one is like being able to lock in and get focused and get there. And then the next stage up is like knowing what to do and then executing on it.
Right.
A lot of times they don't know how to get from 0 to 1 to be able to get into that flow state and then take the next steps.
Exactly. Yeah, they don't know how to focus. Yeah. And there is a continual, on a kind of micro level, or kind of like your most kind of basic level of distraction, and on a kind of even larger scale, there is a constant war for your attention and your focus, and we have lost that war in a lot of ways. So, the challenge for business owners today is really, how do I reclaim that? We talk a lot about leverage, and I was thinking about it the other day, and it really hit me that for business owners, your greatest leverage is the power of your brain, the power of your mind. And if you're unable to harness that first and foremost, it doesn't really matter what tactic, what, little system or anything there, because true leverage starts with your mind. And if you're unable to leverage that and use the power of that, then you will continually run up against that same limiting factor time and time again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that's why this becomes more and more important to us is because as business owners, we're always concerned of, well, how do I get there? How do I scale to do this thing? But if we are unable to know how to even focus on something at a very basic level, and we'll continually spread our attention too thin, then we will continually just operate at that same level and never be able to move forward. So Alex is a great example of being able to say, here, I'm actually demonstrating to you, and listen to the words that I say, and my actions align with that I am using flow state, whether or not I know it.
Yeah, exactly. And we've used them in a few other podcast episodes where we've used some of the examples that he's, portrayed in his day-to-day life. One is being the saying no, but saying yes to something bigger.
Absolutely.
Right. So
he's just a great example. And that's the thing. It's, when you see success, well, what are the earmarks of success, and start diving into that and start understanding what those are. Well, a lot of people get caught up. I love it when Alex, he talks about, hey, I made millions of dollars and I didn't have a morning routine. I made millions of dollars without making my bed. He kind of dispels a lot of things around, very similar. He's like, hey, you can still do that. Yeah. But the thing is, if you're not really at that level to really understand what that means, you can get lost in that detail and say, oh, well, I don't have to have a morning routine. That's great. Alex might not need a morning routine. Alex may have just a very different routine for him. And what we talk about in our Burnout to Breakthrough course is the importance sometimes routines have, is that it offloads the drain on your prefrontal cortex, and then it shifts it back into your basal ganglia and other parts of the brain, because then it's like taking processing power off your prefrontal cortex, which is logic, decision-making, all that, and you move it back to the basal ganglia, and suddenly you've freed up that additional cognitive load. So sometimes routines are important to help people, but it just depends on where you are. And so if you're trying to say, oh, well, Alex does this, you are missing the fundamental point. We're going to focus in on one of the most important points that has allowed him to continually outpace and outperform most other entrepreneurs. And that is leveraging flow state. So if you didn't know it, we're going to talk about Alex leveraging flow state. So I think the first thing is really, he starts in a lot of his last videos, he really talks about, there's an idea that if you as a business owner cannot sit in a room undistracted for 8 hours and focus on something, he's like, you have a problem. That right there is the root cause of a lot of the challenges right now. And it's the inability to focus. And we've said it, I don't know how many times we've said it before, but flow follows focus. So if you are unable to focus, you will be unable to get into flow. So that at a very foundational level is so important. and a good indicator for if you are unable to sit for any length of time without being distracted or unable to focus on something, then that is a critical skill that you have to be able to work on immediately. Because Alex is saying, listen, if you can't do this, if you can't sit in a room and lock in for 8 hours, then that's a problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And honestly, I feel like a broken record every time like we come to this conversation or bring up a similar topic around that. Is it's crazy how lost of an art it is to be able to focus these days. It boggles my mind that people are still not aware of the fact that they have zero control over their attention, and they're okay living the life that they have been because they just don't know how to get out of it. And the answer is right in your face.
It is.
Yeah.
I mean, the answer is literally in your day-to-day behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
And I know, I mean, I get this. This is something we still struggle with day to day. I mean, it's not something that you just, suddenly it's magically fixed, right?
Yeah.
And the whole point of this is to say, look, what we're talking about here is absolutely verifiable. There are amazingly successful people that leverage flow to move their business. Mm-hmm. The problem is if you don't know how to do that, great. It's like me giving you a boat and say, here, get to that shore over there. I've given you the mechanism,
the tool, yeah,
and say, oh, that's flow. Go ahead, get to the other side. You're going to be, oh, okay. What do I do? How do I steer this thing? How do I make it go? You don't know that there's a motor in the back. You don't know how to get it started. All the things, and that's what we're doing here. That's the whole point, is to dispel, but also highlight that most people don't realize that is a massive leverage factor for them that they're not even aware of.
And the water has an ogopogo, which is a metaphor for distractions. So when you're driving your boat across, you're like, oh, well, what is that?
Ogopogo. Okay, so that's very 99% of people will never know.
The Loch Ness monster.
The Loch Ness monster. For those in the Okanagan, you'll know what Ogopogo is. For some of the Canadian viewers, you'll probably know who it is.
Yeah.
It's the Kraken.
It's the Kraken,
It's the Kraken.
Exactly.
It's the perfect analogy.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, or one of many great analogies for that. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I mean, that is kind of the telltale sign that Alex really leverages flow state. That the other thing is, he talks a lot about distraction. We talk a lot about distraction and your inability to focus, and that we're distracted all the time. And so one of the key part of that is if you're unable to sit in a room and focus on anything, well, then you're probably really distracted. Mm-hmm. There's another really interesting thing he talks about around his use of the phone, which, I mean, you and I have talked about this all the time. Yeah. There's a lot of things that I do very similarly. It's his phone. I don't go to this, and I've thought about doing this now, was before I have like no background on my phone. Everything is like dialed right down. There's nothing exciting.
Standard, yeah.
I moved all of my communication apps to the very last page, and they're all grouped. And so if I want to go do something, it's just a way of creating friction to get to it. So I'm like, oh, do I actually need to do this? But it's also a good thing. Like, how many times am I actually going through the motion of swiping all the way to the last page to get to communication app that don't really need to, right? The other thing he does is, so he puts his in grayscale so that there's no color. And I can't remember the metric around that. Was that
it's not visually appealing.
It's not visually appealing. So there's less dopamine. There's less things that are drawing your attention and focus to your phone. So you're less apt to want to look at it. Mm-hmm. So that is a very simple way that you can start to dial down those dopamine receptors as it regards to your phone. Mm-hmm. Then he turns off all notifications. I'm probably like 97% there. Mm-hmm. I don't have everything silenced. And he makes a really good point, and I agree with this, is that you are now dictating when you want to do something, when you want to reach out and make a phone call, when you want to check a notification, Because if it's an emergency, you call 911.
Yeah.
You don't call me for an emergency.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And even as my days, like a lot of times leading massive organizations, I said, look, unless it's fire, flood, or blood, it's not an emergency.
Yeah.
Until you have to deal with the fire, and then that's emergency.
Yeah.
But you're also calling emergency services. You're calling 911. You're calling your emergency responders.
Yeah.
There's not a whole lot you can do in that moment to control that. So it's a very valid,
Yeah.
So he controls. He's the one that's now dictating the phone. We're not allowing the phone and the applications and all the things and the notifications dictate to us when it gets our attention. We are now back in control in the driver's seat of when we determine when we're going to. And that is an extremely powerful exercise to go through, because then you can start to be aware of, oh, I am really checking this thing quite often.
Yeah. Yeah. And it goes back to the example that we were talking about, where if you're on a road and you're going 60 kilometers an hour, but there's a roadblock every kilometer, you're slowing down and then you're picking your speed back up. And by the time you're, hitting perfect, let's call it like perfect driving flow state, right?
Yeah.
You're breaking down again and then you're starting all over again. So I'm about to expose myself. I'm a green text bubble guy. I have an Android and it actually has a very cool feature where you can set up routines on it where for a certain time frame in the day when you are going to be busy, it doesn't notify you for anything.
Yeah.
It's just blank and it doesn't let you open up any apps. It's just impossible to get through, right? And then right after that's done, if you have, say, like a lunch break or something where you want to like now respond back to people or there's something that you have mental capacity for, it'll turn that routine off. Now all of the notifications that were coming through will now come through and you can take the 15, 30 minutes to go through all of them. And then it goes back into another routine where it just shuts it off again. Yeah.
So iPhone users have the same thing with do not disturb and focus. Yeah. You can set the level at which that does.
Yeah.
So, you can utilize technology and you can leverage it to help you with it if you're willing to, right? So that's really the point is when we talk about focus, and this is another kind of concept that is becoming a lot more and more clear as we continually talk about it and other connections are made and we continually grow and learn, is that, when you say focus, it's really, focusing is really just the elimination of options. And the reason why we're unable to focus a lot of times is because there's just too many options. And as we start to remove the options, we can then focus more and more. So if you're having trouble focusing on something, start removing options.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And that includes from a, environment standpoint. So the place that you are doing your work. So it's remove visual stimulation, remove, like clean off the desk, remove things that are going to just capture your focus and your attention. And then even this is why clear goals are such a huge flow trigger, right? Is because the clearer their goal is, there's less option there.
Yeah.
So focus is about elimination, right? Which is a critical skill, especially as business owners. And dopamine is the molecule of more. And as business owners, we always want the next thing, the coolest new thing. And we add more and more to our plate. But the key really is stripping away a lot of those things that are not helping. And it's actually just dividing our attention and focus, which is why, again, that our Burnout to Breakthrough masterclass is so important, because that's what we focus on is how do you get that? How do you instill that ability first and foremost? Because that will help you be able to focus, and focus drives flow.
Agreed. So, and this is no shot at Alex, but I listened to his podcast and I'm not biased at all in making this comment. The thing you're doing really well right now is helping break that down. What I've noticed, Alex, and at least in the podcast I've listened to, is always like, just don't do it. Just don't do it. You don't need to do it. And,
Yeah.
It's easier said when you have that skill developed already and you already have it unlocked. It's a lot easier to just be like, yeah, as a business owner, I don't do that at all. Right. Perfect. Great for you. But it is a skill that most business owners don't know. And that's what sets us apart as business coaches, because we have that neuroscience backing knowledge that supports the theory, and we teach you, again, like you said, in the Burnout to Breakthrough, we teach you how to get away from those types of distractions.
Yeah. For a little more, I guess, for context for Alex, he's talking about a podcast. He is talking in larger frameworks.
Absolutely, yeah.
So because when you really listen to a lot of things, like when they are dialed in, like they have a very, they're very great at breaking things down. I think that's it's a format that we have the opportunity to do that right now, and then we're blessed to be able to do that. And so it's like anything, we stand on the shoulders of giants that have come before us, and we didn't discover flow state, but we are continually leading the charge with how do you when you see someone like Alex and you see him actually implement it, but doesn't actually be able to call it out.
Yeah.
Then that's what we want to do. We want to be able to dissect it for you as a business owner to say, oh, wow, I didn't really understand that. Cool. How do I do that? Or how do you know that it is actually flow state? So those are really the fundamental things. So he can actually lock himself in a room. Yeah. And what's really good is, flow it's a cycle. So, he does a great thing where he'll say, you know what, I don't have the thing. I just work until I know my output starts to drop. So he's really in tune with when his neurochemicals start to drop off. He knows when he needs to go into recovery, both at a micro, so like kind of like the day scale where he's working in the day. So he'll just power through, but he's very focused. He's very clear on what he needs to do. And then when he notices his output starts to drop off, he's like, okay, that's my signal for when I need to go into recovery, right? Then he'll also string that for longer time frames together. So he doesn't work a standard work week where it's, hey, I work Monday to Friday. He might work for 19 days straight, just very focused on something. And then he'd be like, oh, I need to now take some recovery. And so he's just more in tune with his ability to do that. And because he's been doing it for so long, he's built that skill to that level. But don't kid yourself as a business owner new getting into flow state. If you are struggling with distraction, you've not been able to focus before, that you think you're going to be able to go in and suddenly you're going to hit that level of flow state and operate at that level. That's just not going to happen. Yeah. We can teach you to do that. Yeah. And that's what we do, because that's why we exist here. But like, that's the difference, and that's the nuances from someone who operates at like master level and talking to someone who isn't even aware, right? Is just unconsciously unaware.
No, I agree. And that's why, like at the beginning, I was talking about the layers, and Alex focuses more on the planning and the doing. Yeah. And we are also helping bridge the gap of like the focusing piece and how to get to the planning and the focusing. Yeah.
The only way you get there is by developing that skill of focus now and leveraging your brain right now and understanding how to leverage that. And then you can start to build other leverage when you start to learn how to leverage the power of your own mind. That's the key point to that. There's another really great story when we talk about it. And it was, Alex talks about, I've heard it many times, and it's around Jerry Seinfeld. And because we usually only ever see the output, right? We see the outcomes. We're like, oh, wow, how does Jerry Seinfeld put on these amazing shows? And why is he so funny? And, Alex, how has he built acquisition.com? It's hundreds of $1 million, worth company, and they have all these companies across their portfolios. And we only see the output, right? And we don't see the grit and the flow that goes into doing that. And so this is a really interesting one, because one other thing that I will say Alex talks a lot about is time blocks, which is a fundamental building block of flow. Is we actually block the time for flow, and then we build in clear goals. This is where the Jerry Seinfeld comes in, is that, Jerry, people are like, oh, how does Jerry come up with all this material? And it's really around that he schedules time. He goes into the room and there's nothing there, no distractions except a pad and a pen. And he has a rule, says, I don't have to write, but I can't do anything else.
Yeah.
And so he schedules a time, he time blocks it. Alex time blocks. What is the fundamental piece of the 1 month day and flow? It's flow blocks. We time block it off and build in the recovery. Yeah. So that is really how you can operate like Alex Hormozi. You can scale like Alex Hormozi, but you have to be able to scale your biology first. That's the key.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's honestly, like, the way you said that makes perfect sense. And I mean, we've been saying it several times, and just the Jerry Seinfeld example of you don't have to write, but you can't do anything else. But that's the only option you have, right?
Yeah.
So
it's you make something else so like the opportunity. The other option is so boring.
Yeah, exactly.
It forces you to do the
you
thing
have
that
no
you don't need to do.
And again, it's a beautiful thing, but it's also a really horrible thing that the world we live in now is filled with options. Like, oh, if you're bored, turn on the TV. If you don't like the TV, go play some video games.
Yeah.
If you don't like that,
doom scroll Instagram.
Yeah, exactly. It's just everything is so available. It's a beauty of the world that we live in, but the bad side of having too much of a good is, you don't do anything productive.
Yeah.
So
yeah, we get stuck in the cycle of busyness.
Yeah.
And not actually moving things forward.
Yeah. Constantly running into road bumps.
Yeah.
Or speed bumps.
Yeah, and if you don't slow down, they send you off the road.
Exactly.
All right. I think with that, we'll close this one off. So that's how you can scale your business like Alex Hormozi, but you got to scale your biology first. So that's the lesson for today. We are Biz Meds. I'm Darris.
My name is Saad.
And we are here to give you the minimum effective dose for your business. And if you've been with us since the beginning, thank you. Mom, love you. Thank you. Saad's mom, we love you. We thank you so much. Everyone, if you're new, thank you for joining us. Like Andy Frisell says, don't be a hoe, share the show. And we don't get paid. So just please, if you learned something and you like it, share it to someone else and let them enjoy it as well. So that's today's wrap. We're going to see you in the next episode. And remember, you're just one day away from the life you've always dreamed about. We will see you in the next episode.